Hey guys, this is the second and the last part of my memories in Spain, and it will be on Barcelona. I will again get some help from AI to voice my dictation and for some visual support. And without further ado, let's continue. Lastly, I was in Madrid, and
After
after
spending some
spending
time in
some
Madrid,
time.
I took the most expensive train of my life to Barcelona. The ticket cost even more than a flight, which seemed to be the case across all of Spain. I never really understood why. Anyway, when I arrived and stepped off the train, I was immediately struck by how calm everything felt. The weather was soft and gentle, the people relaxed, the sunlight itself seemed warmer and slower. The whole city radiated a chill, vacation like atmosphere. It reminded me of my childhood trips to Antalya, the vacation city of Turkey, where I used to go with my family. It was amazing to feel that same warmth and ease again, a decade later. The contrast in weather between Amsterdam and Barcelona was immediately sensible. In Barcelona, everything, every social interaction, every expression, felt more vivid and effortless. The warmth of the climate and the presence of the sea seemed to amplify life itself, making the city's rhythm more open, relaxed, and expressive. The most distinctive feature of Barcelona for me was its grid block urban layout. The old city was classic and beautiful, a warm, sincere place with narrow, aesthetic streets, monumental churches, and charming squares that carried the essence of traditional European spirit. But the new city, designed with a precise grid plan, was something entirely different. It was the first time I had experienced such an urban structure, and it felt astonishingly different, almost surreal. When I first saw Barcelona's grid structure on Google Maps, I thought it would be fascinating. But once I got into it, it turned out to be astonishingly disappointing. Cars and traffic were everywhere. There was no escaping them. Even when biking, you had to move side by side with vehicles at all times. The grid layout, I realized, made the city completely accessible to cars from every point. Sure, it had its practical advantages, much like Kiev's central planning that favored car traffic, but at what cost? I realized that what made Amsterdam so beautiful was precisely the absence of this. In Amsterdam, people, not cars, shaped the rhythm of the city. Cars make you feel like a second class being in urban life. I want to walk or bike freely through a city without being surrounded by engine noise and breathing in polluted air. It wasn't just pedestrians who suffered from the grid system. When biking around Barcelona, I felt as if I were driving a car. Because of the block-based city planning, cyclists had to move entirely within the flow of car traffic. You always shared the same lanes, obeyed the same lights, and had no alternative routes or freedom of movement. To make it worse, the grid was so dense and the streets so heavily lined with trees that you could barely see the sky while moving through them. Despite all these issues, it was at least easy to navigate. Directions were simple, like, after 3 blocks, I'll turn right. The more I got to know the city, the easier and more enjoyable it became to move around. Over time, I even learned routes that let me avoid the crowded grid blocks altogether. Another thing that struck me in Barcelona was the parks. They weren't made of soil but entirely of sand. No real earth anywhere. I didn't enjoy them at all. The whole city felt like a desert with minimal greenery, and in the few green areas that did exist, there were often immigrants living in tents, cooking inside the parks. After seeing that, I missed the Netherlands deeply. It all felt a bit chaotic and unkempt. At the time, I thought it was crazy, but of course, I hadn't been to Paris yet. I met many Argentinians and other South Americans in Spain. Most of them were there for work, a kind of migration within the Spanish-speaking world. I also met some Spaniards who had spent a period of their lives in South America, and they often told me how naturally at home they felt there. Those South American immigrants also blended smoothly into Spanish society, speaking the same language and sharing similar cultural codes. It made me reflect on colonialism and assimilation. I realized that the industrialized colonialism and assimilation processes of the Spanish and British empires had, in a way, made the world more connected. And in the long run, this interconnectedness has continued to greatly benefit those former empires and their descendants. When walking along the beach at night, I came across a terrifying part of Barcelona's coastline. The final stretch was built from massive blocks of concrete, dystopian in scale. Just looking at them made me feel like a tiny creature. They were absurdly disproportionate, especially at night, staring at those giant forms disappearing into the dark sea, fading into the horizon. It was unsettling. I genuinely wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. Barcelona was a moderate city in terms of luxury, yet it was also full of poor, desperate people, many under the influence of various substances, wandering the streets like zombies and searching for food in garbage bins. It was painful to witness. Another striking sight was the abundance of tuk-tuks, bicycles with passenger compartments at the back. It was a big business in the city, mostly run by immigrants who spent their days pedaling and carrying tourists around. Barcelona was, in many ways, a summertime hub for young people across Europe, a place to enjoy, drink, and let go. I don't blame anyone. I was one of them too. But at the same time, all along the beach, there were black market immigrants carrying beers and sodas in their hands, trying to make a living by selling them to carefree tourists. It was sad to witness how poverty and desperation shaped their behavior and position within that social system. Spain overall, especially the southern parts, made me feel like I was traveling through a region with a strong Arab influence. It wasn't just the weather, the culture shared many similarities as well. There were also many immigrants from Arab countries. Small grocery shops, or bakals, were everywhere in the city, and I loved them. They were open 24/7, unlike the large supermarket chains, which frequently closed for breaks. These immigrant communities were an indispensable part of the city. One of the most shocking things I witnessed during my travels was at Barceloneta Beach. I went there expecting an ordinary beach, but what I found was a fully nude one. People were completely naked, not just a few individuals, but the entire crowd. There were over 100 people of all types, casually spending their time without a single piece of clothing. At first, I was truly shocked. It was my first time visiting a nude beach, and I hadn't expected it at all. But after a few minutes, I realized it was entirely normal there. Nobody seemed to care or even notice. After a while, it also started to feel normal to me. It was an incredible social experience, watching a norm shift within myself in real time. It wasn't something I saw elsewhere in the EU, though. As far as I know, it's more of a uniquely Spanish phenomenon. Spain, overall, was by far the most nudity-friendly and loving country I've ever been to. Just to clarify, I'm a heterosexual man. That said, I've met countless homosexual people throughout my travels, not only across Europe, but also back home in Istanbul. So I tend to be observant about how freely people can express their sexuality in different societies, as I see it as an indicator of broader social freedom. Although it's often said that the Netherlands, and Amsterdam in particular, is the most gay-friendly place in Europe, Barcelona felt even more so to me. It was, without a doubt, the gayest city I've ever been to. Gay people were everywhere, and their presence felt completely natural, so normalized that it seemed like being gay was simply part of everyday life and culture in Barcelona. I didn't just see excessively open gay people throughout the city. There were also countless gay-themed businesses with eye-catching signboards that stood out immediately. It was unlike any other place I'd been to. To be honest, it even made Barcelona feel a bit unserious as a city, like it prioritized enjoyment and expression over order or restraint. Barcelona, especially compared to Amsterdam or even Madrid, felt almost lawless. Immigrants openly engaged in all kinds of black market activities throughout the city. Strangely, though, it didn't feel dangerous, just very different. There was a sense of chaos, but also a kind of raw freedom in it, something that contrasted sharply with the strict order of Northern Europe. Another perspective on that lawlessness could be seen in the city's landscape. Compared to the Netherlands, Barcelona was full of hidden, unseen spots where you could truly be on your own. There were places where you were almost guaranteed not to encounter anyone else. That gave the city a dual feeling, both unsafe and deeply free. In contrast, Amsterdam had no such spaces. Police cars were everywhere, people filled every corner, and there was almost no concept of privacy. Everything felt orderly and exposed. That contrast stood out sharply to me, Barcelona offered a taste of raw, personal freedom, while Amsterdam embodied perfect, visible order. I have to admit, I enjoyed the freedom more. In every country I've been to, night brings a different face to the cities. When darkness falls, the bandits of the government vanish from the streets. Nighttime also makes people more anonymous, giving them the courage to do whatever they want. Not only people, but also nature itself transforms. Various animals and insects emerge once the lights fade. In Barcelona, I experienced this night face of the city on another level. I witnessed many tourists using the beach to pee or even poop during the night. Peeing in the streets at night is fairly common across many EU cities I visited, but defecating on the beach was beyond anything I had seen. And you wouldn't believe that those same people were the elegant, well-dressed tourists you'd see during the day. In the last weeks of my time in the city, I was biking around the main square very early in the morning and came across something fascinating: an automated bird feeding system designed for pigeons and gulls. Early in the morning, the machine would make a distinct noise to alert the birds nearby that feeding time was about to begin. Hearing the familiar sound, flocks of pigeons and gulls would gather, waiting in anticipation. Moments later, the machine would automatically scatter bird feed across the square. It was an oddly mesmerizing mix of technology and tradition. But there was also a darker side to this scene. During the chaotic food wars that broke out between pigeons and gulls, the gulls sometimes abandoned the seed-based food altogether and instead attacked and hunted pigeons for meat. I witnessed it with my own eyes. It was brutal. In Barcelona, after having a great time with fellow tourists and exchange students and meeting few to no Spanish people, I realized something quite clearly. When you're in a foreign country as a tourist, expat, exchange student, or immigrant, you won't and aren't supposed to form truly meaningful relationships with local people. They already have their own lives, families, and established circles. Instead, you naturally end up socializing with people like yourself, other foreigners, travelers, and expats, because they're the ones without fixed roots or established routines. That's the number one rule of social life abroad. It reminded me of the saying, "Birds of a feather flock together." It's also a bit of a romantic fantasy to think of bonding deeply with locals while traveling. In reality, locals are just living their regular lives, working, studying, running errands. Their world doesn't revolve around the idea of adventure that travelers chase.
Okay, that's all that I wanted to talk about my memories in Spain and Barcelona. Spain as a country and Barcelona as a city, they were both amazing places. And especially Barcelona, its unique value was social life. Anyways, after Barcelona, I went for Paris, France, and I spent 1.5 months in Paris, and I'm gonna make some videos about my memories in Paris. But for now, I'm gonna put some photos I captured in Barcelona, and I will include two very short videos at the very end of the video. That's all. Enjoy. Cheers.